All right, we're live. Welcome everybody to another session of EvolveLAB Live. Today we have with us Marcelo. Marcelo, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great, thank you.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
All right, so everybody knows Marcelo. If you don't know Marcelo, you need to check him out. Marcelo is Associate Director of Advanced Technology at John A. Martin. Marcelo also has earned 17 first place speaker awards between 2012 and 2020 at AU and RTC Built, etc. Marcelo, dude, every time I go to AU, I got it. It's like I schedule based on you and people that I want to see. And so I always so appreciate all of your talks. I know that's what you're known for, amongst many other things. I know you wear a lot of different hats, running a role at John A. Martin, as well as books you're authoring and presentations you're doing. So I'm so grateful today that you're giving us some of your time and some of your energy. Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate that.
For sure. We were chatting last week with Dana, and her and I were just bragging you up on the last session. And we were just talking, I remember one of the best classes you did was the practical use cases for Dynamo. And I remember sitting in your AU class with my laptop, and I was like so inspired by because when you see like some of the marketing for Dynamo, it's like the twisty towers and of course all these like abstract geometries. And I was like so inspired like during your class on like practical use cases with Dynamo that like so much like I opened up my laptop and like started like trying to practice some of the things that you were showing. And so I so appreciate you, your friendship and your contributions to the industry. And everything that you have to present. I think it shows when you have all these first place awards that the content that you're putting out there is stellar. So thank you so much, Marcelo, for your contributions and all the knowledge you share with all of us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for sharing that story with me, Bill. I've heard that from a lot of people. That particular class you're talking about was probably Practical Dynamo.
Yeah.
Right, in 2014, probably around there.
Yep, I think that's right. Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, know who was also in that class was John Pearson.
Yeah, John's awesome.
Yeah, he told me a similar story, and what I found, the reason I made that class is just like you said. When I found out that Dynamo was a thing, and it was mostly for the twisting towers and the more less rectilinear geometry stuff, a lot of people were avoiding it because they were like, well, I can't do that. It has nothing to do with me. And then when I was thinking, I really need to teach a class on this, a practical one, when I actually Googled practical Dynamo BIM, I got 0 results.
Oh, man.
I was like, oh, okay. So I really need to tackle this. So I spent about a year working up examples, trying to find ways to explain it and be very applicable and like kind of connecting the dots, right? So some of those early examples were just real simple things like you pull this parameter and you put it in that one, right? And it was things like that. But that was the spark that got a lot of people going. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
it means a lot to me. Yeah, I get. Yeah, it's really it's been a long journey, and that was the beginning of the Dynamo journey. So I'm glad that also was able to influence your career in some way. Appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. No, it totally did. And I remember like when I remember Ian, he always says, we started using like when Dynamo really, it sucked. Like it had like just the little yellow nodes, like when you would like hook it up. I don't remember if you remember like the old school graph.
Yeah.
And I remember going from like Grasshopper was, pretty mature at the time. And of course this continued to mature. And then I was dabbling in Dynamo and it just wasn't quite there yet. And I feel like, especially over the last few years and when you were showing your class, it was like right around that time period, I felt like Dynamo hit a level of maturity that it actually became like usable, like on actual projects. And there was enough new nodes added. And then also, of course, like contributions from others in the community with like the package manager, people creating like, what John's doing with Rhythm and the Clockwork package and all of that. It finally became a place where like it had matured enough where now people could actually start using it. And then, which is also, I think, a good segue into also like the Grasshopper side. You're using not just Dynamo, but Grasshopper in your role quite a bit, right? And also with like some of the Rhino Inside methods as well. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And a common, yeah, that's right. Right. And that's a newer adventure for me, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you know, like what I always try to do from a professional standpoint is always try to look ahead and find out what new technology there is, and try to absorb it. And if I can find a way to explain it to the industry in an easy, simple way so it could be digested, then I'll do that. So Dynamo was just kind of hit me right in the middle of my of what I was doing. But before that, I was preaching the word on Revit and how to do organic shapes, you know, things like that. And then so the newer adventure I've been on has been Rhinoceros and Grasshopper, and finding ways to integrate that with Revit workflows and the kind of concept around interoperability. And yeah, and then like there's this new technology which is the Rhino inside Revit that allows Grasshopper now to talk with Revit. So there's a whole nother area of exploration out there that is that's real exciting.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. And then I remember we had you on, it's been too long, man. I think it's probably been like 4 years, but you and I did a session, and hopefully this isn't embarrassing you too much. It probably embarrasses me more than you, but I don't remember if you remember this, but you came on and did like a virtual reality session where we did this live stream, and that was a ton of fun too. So I remember you were doing this with like the Star Wars, and what was Stingray was like the VR solution at the time, was it not?
Right. This one was, yeah, that's right. This was more about just virtual reality and how you can kind of use it in different ways. Yeah, that's right. But this one, oh, look at me there. I was a young man then. Still same office, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, except now this time I have the lightsaber collection in the back.
I love it.
Viewers are wondering what that is. Yeah, certainly. That's what that is.
I love that.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah, in fact, you're looking at one of the Vive sensors right there.
Oh yeah.
That's one of them. Yeah. So this is still kind of the virtual reality cave, I suppose. But yeah, that was another exploration that I was getting into, that I thought virtual reality, real-time rendering, game engine physics, I thought was going to be a big part of our industry. So I kind of wrapped my head around that thing so I could kind of start to teach the world. And I taught a few classes, and when we talked, we gave some demos to say this was going along. And that's when Enscape was just in its infancy. I was even doing beta testing at that time with it. So it was yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I mean, it's here to stay, right? You know, and maybe because thinking about that, Dynamo is very much a part of the AEC industry now, and so is Enscape and or other type of game engine technology, virtual reality or real-time rendering tools. And those latched on in our industry and grew like wildfire. And I think the magic formula is that it has to be practical to latch on to the industry. It also has to be affordable, and then it has to be easy to learn. I think those are kind of the three pillars that hold up something to be like a software to be kind of successful. So that's why I think Enscape grew like wildfire, and so did Dynamo. And now the word I'm kind of teaching now is that Grasshopper and the new Rhino inside Revit technology falls in line with that. It has those three aspects as well, and it's a real exciting time.
Heck yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think in overall it's like reducing friction, right? Like if there's any tool that you want to start using or implement in the industry, any way that you can kind of reduce friction and reduce the barrier to entry, you know, to that said tool. You know, like I remember like 3ds Max, for example, like versus Enscape, right? Like 3ds Max, like you had to really almost be like a computer scientist to like run that. You had to know ambient lighting, and when you do ray tracing, and when you go and you bounce the light off of here, like what does it do? And you know, there's tabs within tabs on Max, where like in Enscape, I feel like it's almost like a turnkey. Like you publish your model, and it's like you get these beautiful renderings like really quick and really easy, to your point. Do you agree?
I totally agree. And you know, I totally agree. And And Enscape, I like to compare like a phone app. You know, like apps on the phone are so easy to use, right? You go to the App Store, you get an app, and like things are basically simplified so that you can have a quick interface. Well, I mean, I don't see why that philosophy can't happen for programs that we use. And I think we talked about this a long time ago, Bill, about interoperability and having kind of like, you know, the easy button and things like that. But I mean, that's where things really are successful, is when you have these easy entry points. Like, okay, I want to code and I want to touch the Revit API. Well, how do I do that? Do I gotta make a Revit add-in, and then I've got to step into the API, and I got to code, and then I've got to step out, and I've got to do my, you know, all the things that you would do with the text coding. And am I going to use C# or am I going to use Python? You know, or am I going to put down a bunch of boxes and wires, which is visual programming, and link them up, and then get it done, right? And so that is a much easier entry point. And there's lessons to be learned in our industry, I think, with any software, is that the easier you can make it, and if it's practical, then you've got a winning formula.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Which might be good. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so, you know, I don't quite, I think the industry has a ways to go on kind of wrapping their head around that. But, you know, that's kind of my philosophy with everything I do in the AEC industry. Like, if I'm trying to learn something new, I've got to think, okay, how am I going to learn this? And then how am I going to teach this in an hour? How am I going to explain this to someone in 1 hour? You know, whether it's text coding or whether it's virtual reality or doing renderings in 3ds Max, right? So that's where my brain always is. So I'm really trying to get things simplified. Like, how am I going to put this in a one-page summary? How am I going to do it in a one? And it becomes very difficult. But if I can wrap my head around how to do that, I like to simplify things, and that's the whole basis of my even my blog site, which is called Simply Complex. Also the podcast that I run, which is Simply Complex. You take complicated things, you break them down into simple parts. So I think you know, I think the industry has a way to go to wrap their head around trying to make things more simplified from a user interface standpoint. I think AEC professionals are one of the most smartest group of individuals on the planet. Doesn't mean we have to dumb things down, but I think if we make things a bit user-friendly, then because we're all so swamped for time, it's easier to digest. So I think we're going off a little tangent, but I think, you know, if our industry could adapt this, then things I think would be a little easier. Like, for example, working with programs APIs. Like, a lot of APIs in programs, even Revit was built on this philosophy. They're basically for developers by developers. But now we're seeing that any AEC professional can start to code, like with the visual programming stuff. And so I would like to see more APIs being more user-friendly, more interested to everyone. And then I think in that way, our industry can grow and be a lot more flexible. The idea of this whole computational design, I think, will move a little faster, get better adoption, and so on. And, you know, so I try to do my part, and I think we'll talk about in a little bit about the new book that I wrote, to try to get things into these little digestible pieces so that we could show the industry this new technology in kind of an easy and fun way, right?
Totally, 100%, which I think is a good segue. I'll share my screen and kind of show the book here, and then if it's okay, Marcelo, I'll let you share your screen. But as a segue, like, this is something I wish I had, you know, when I was learning Dynamo and Grasshopper, and just having like a cheat sheet, so that way as you're going through, because you're like, sometimes you're like, gosh, how did I get to that compilation, you know, of what I built before in that graph? And having something that you could use as a cheat sheet, or even as a beginner, you know, to be able to start understanding when you hook things together, what happens. And so I think this is really great. And as we're segueing into this, just as a comment, I mean, we have quite a few listeners. As you guys have questions for Marcelo, please throw them up there in the chat window, and I'll try to grab those questions. We'd love to know just a little bit more about the audience too. If you guys could say maybe where you guys are located at, either in the US or otherwise, which city and state, and maybe if you guys do or don't have experience with Dynamo and Grasshopper, I think that would be really great. So throw that up in the chat window for everyone that's listening. Let us know, do you have experience with Dynamo and Grasshopper? Let us know which city or state you guys are listening from. And then as we have questions or comments, throw them up in the chat window. We like a lot of interaction.
Or country.
What's that?
Or country.
Or country. Yeah, or country. Yeah, because we do have people that listen all over. So, or country, let us know what country you're from. So Marcelo, tell me a little bit about your motivation for the book. Like you, where's the why for the book? Was there a problem that you were trying to solve? Was it something that you were doing personally for yourself, like a list of, things you were keeping for yourself and your workflows, and then you thought, man, I bet others could benefit from this? What was kind of your motivation or your why for writing the book?
Okay, good question. Maybe if you scroll up, we can have the cover as the backdrop as I talk about it.
Yeah.
Just so, in case some people don't know, there is a book that I wrote. It's right here, the Dynamo and Grasshopper for Revit cheat sheet reference manual. There were a few reasons why I wrote the book, and a few reasons why it's kind of formatted in this way. So we could take it step by step. Is that what we want to do?
Sure. Yeah. Whatever you want to do, man.
Okay. So it actually all started with the Autodesk University classes that I was teaching, and as well as the build classes I was teaching, which was, and I already started to mention it, I was trying to find a way to boil down some concepts into a very easy, digestible way. And I think we have some comments already about that being kind of simplified. And I was, what I was doing when I was teaching my classes is I had these elaborate handouts, really long, like novels. It was like, I had an image and I had all these words and explanation on how to do it. And then I observed some people looking through some of the handouts early on. This was like 2012, 2013. And I saw that people were just looking at the pictures and they're kind of flipping through. So I was like, if everyone was just looking at the pictures, then I'll just start putting steps on the pictures. Like this is what's happening and this is what you do. And then I started eliminating all the words, all the extra stuff. And then I just ended up with just pictures. And I just summarized the pictures. I just summarized the activities or what you needed to learn just on this one-page picture. And so I kind of started to develop this one-page format on my handouts for the conferences I was going to. And I started teaching more and more Dynamo classes, but other classes too. So this was kind of what I was doing. And like I said, I try to simplify things, get them into one page, which quite honestly is not that easy to do sometimes, because when you have a lot of concepts, it's hard to boil things down into one page, But anyway, so this is kind of my philosophy. So I started building a bit of a catalog of them, and I thought, it's probably a good time to start to standardize the way I do it. So I started standardizing it, kind of the way it looked, the graphics, that sort of thing. And then I thought, a good thing to do now is to probably make some kind of book that I could publish that had all these Dynamo examples and then one-page summaries. But there were a lot of holes I wanted to fill. Like some of them were very basic, some of them were intermediate, some were really advanced. So I wanted to kind of have a good range of them. So over, let's see, 2016, 2017, like 2018, just over the years, I just slowly started filling in the gaps. So I ended up having about almost 200 examples. And I thought it's a good time to publish a book. And so that's when I decided to make a book. This is now we're 2019. I'm about ready to go. And then all of a sudden, I realized that this new technology came out called Rhino inside Revit. And I was very excited about it because it was also Grasshopper, which was visual programming. And now that Grasshopper could talk to Revit using this new technology, I thought, well, maybe it makes sense for me to wrap my head around this whole idea. And so when I started wrapping my head around this idea, I started creating examples that I was familiar with, doing it with Dynamo. So then I started making equivalent Grasshopper examples that I already made with Dynamo. And so I spent almost a whole year doing that. And I thought, if I'm doing this, maybe then this should be part of the book. And so I should do a summary. And then if you scroll down, you already have it open. Go ahead and scroll down. So the idea is, well, maybe what I'll do then is I'll take one page, and then it'll have the Dynamo example. And then on the other opposite page, right there, that's a good example. In fact, that's one we used in that lab in 2014, right here, this one. That might look familiar to you. That's getting set parameter example. Okay, this is how you do it using Dynamo. And then on the left, this is exactly how you do it using Grasshopper. So when I started doing that, I taught myself how to do that. And I thought, well, if I can teach myself how to do this, if I know the right side, I can learn the left side. Or if I know the left side, I can do the right side. I thought this would probably be a good format for a book. And so I started going through 2019, 2020 on creating the equivalent Grasshopper examples, talking with the McNeil folks who make Rhinoceros and Grasshopper. They're great folks over there, as well as kind of updating some of the Dynamo stuff. And then I ultimately ended making equivalent examples for both. And then I thought, okay, now it's time to make a book. And so that's kind of what you see up there is equivalent Dynamo and Grasshopper examples, you know, kind of on opposite pages.
So are all of them
together?
That's incredible. So is each example have a pairing with its respective Grasshopper or Dynamo version?
Yes, in 99% of the cases. There were times when Dynamo and Grasshopper just don't, it just doesn't make sense to do it. We could talk about those kind of one-off examples, but yes, for the most part, absolutely. So then I was thinking, well, okay, what am I going to do if I have all these? How would I organize it into a book? And so I originally thought, well, maybe this would be like a training manual. But then I thought, well, if it's a training manual, I may limit it to AEC professionals who are already practicing, who already know Dynamo or who already know Grasshopper. So I thought, well, okay, what we'll do, maybe we'll make it a reference manual. And so, so that's kind of where I ended up landing. And I tossed around like ideas for what the book would be called, and I ultimately landed on the title of yeah, you see it up there. If you scroll one more time, you're doing all the work for me. Dynamo and Grasshopper. This book is all about how they talk with Revit. So Dynamo and Grasshopper for Revit, and then their cheat sheets, and it's a reference manual. So that's the full title. Now, when I started doing early screening with and I talked to a lot of Dynamo and Grasshopper experts, the early screenings with the book, they were like, well, like, so if you scroll down again, sorry, I'm making you move back and forth.
You're good.
Yeah, so let's take this example here, right? So this one shows on the left there shows how to take a surface out of Rhino and then rebuild it inside of Revit using Grasshopper as the conduit. And then that equivalent Revit is actually a topo surface. It's not a imported SAT. It's actually rebuilds it in Lexis. And so the geometry is controlled by Rhinoceros there. And then on the left, it shows you how to do an equivalent thing, but instead of coming from, so this is where kind of the nuances are. This is not perfectly equal, but if you pull points out of an Excel file using Dynamo, then how do you build a topo surface in Revit? So you know, there is some equivalence there. Okay, and so so then I realized, well, when these early screenings were happening, a lot of people were like, well, where are all the Windows examples, and where are all the door sill examples, and where are all the walk-off mat examples? And I was like, you know what? The whole point of this book, and then maybe you scroll over, you're doing all the work for me, Bill, thank you. If you scroll over back towards the example that you know and love, which would be this one, this one is the get and set instance parameters. That's what this example does. So on the right in Dynamo, it basically takes, you get the bottom of the wall parameter and you assign it to the bottom of the column parameter. That's the example I chose to use, but really it emphasizes the concept. So getting and setting instance parameters for this particular example, but once you learn the concept, because we have such amazing, brilliant AEC professionals, they can take that concept, I'm putting that in quotes, and apply it to something else. Maybe it's a slab edge and an exterior wall, or right, maybe it's for you, it's your key schedules that I think you used it for, right? And so the idea then was like, okay, this book is not about the content examples, it's about the concepts. And so I almost thought about calling it the Grasshopper and Dynamo Book of Concepts, but if I did that, it wouldn't kind of feel real. So what I did was, if you scroll all the way over now to the very left there, yeah. So I thought, okay, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to actually have not a table of contents, but a table of concepts. And so that's what happens here. So if you want to get and set parameters, then you look through here, and then I also color coded them so that they kind of pop. They like, okay, I'm gonna get and set a parameter, or I'm gonna build a surface, or I'm gonna write to Excel, or you know, this is the concepts that you look for, and then you learn the concept, and then you apply it. That's the idea. So here is a table of concepts for Dynamo, and on the left is the table of concepts for Grasshopper. And that's how I thought would be the best way to go about dealing with this as a kind of quote unquote reference manual. One more thing, so I'm doing all the talking, right? But
it's okay. You're good. You're supposed
one
to.
more thing too is that these are books of individual concepts. So for example, the example you showed where it gets and set parameters. Well, there may be another example that builds let's say maybe sets the elevation of a slab, for example, or something like that, based on the elevation, the get and set parameters that you got out of your parameters. Well, I don't show that in that one page, but I show that concept later on. Well, then the idea is that you take these concepts and you put them together to make more complicated workflows in your office. And so that's kind of the way I thought about it, because if I tried to jam too many nodes in one page, it was quite honestly going to be impossible. So that's kind of what the book is all about. It's a book of concepts. It's about Dynamo and Grasshopper and how it works with the Revit database. One more thing is it's broken down into 4 main sections. Basically, kind of a beginner section, which is the geometry section, like all the basics about geometry. How do you build a line? How do you build a point? How do you build a surface? Those kind of things. Then it gets into the Revit database. How do you interact with the Revit database? How do you get and set parameters? How do you build things in Revit? And then the part 3 there is how do you customize Dynamo? And this one uses C# coding. And in Dynamo would be what we call zero-touch nodes. So if you need to make a custom node, how do you do that? And then finally, the part 4, which is most people are interested in when they think about Rhino inside Revit, is the interoperability section. Like, how do I get my rhinoceros geometry in a meaningful way into Revit? If I have a beam, a slab, things like that. So that's the 4 sections that the book is broken down into.
That's great, Marcelo.
Yeah.
And so just to clarify too, and I think you mentioned this, these are a list of concepts. They're not necessarily like a compare between Grasshopper nodes and Dynamo nodes. For example, like flip matrix in Grasshopper is like your list transpose in Dynamo. You're not necessarily comparing nodes, but you're comparing concepts and really workflows in either program.
Right. If you look at that next example, that might be a good one. If you look at that one, yeah. So if you look here on the right, the concept of a coordinate system in Dynamo is actually concept different than in Grasshopper. So on the right, they're called coordinate systems, but in left in Grasshopper, they're called quote unquote frames. So we're not taking like exact node for node comparisons, or I should say components to nodes, because components is Grasshopper, nodes in Dynamo. I call them boxes. I know I get in trouble for that, but they're boxes in the right way. Boxes in there, the boxes in there.
Right.
How do you do that? And there's some interpretation, because there's always many ways to do it, but this was just my interpretation of how to do equivalence in both. And I've the thing I didn't realize that this book would have is that it has been teaching Dynamo users Grasshopper, and it has been teaching Grasshopper users Dynamo. And that's what's really exciting to me, because above and beyond just being a reference manual for either Dynamo or Grasshopper, it's helping people with the equivalents. And you know what also influenced me to kind of do these equivalences is there was a show I watched. I can't remember the name of it, but there was a gentleman, I think it was called The Terminal. There was a gentleman who was stuck in an airport for months, and he didn't know how to speak English, but he found a book, I think it was a tour guide in his language, and he found the equivalent in English. And so he just went page by page, right, in the montage, and then learned English because of the equivalents. And so I thought that's a great idea, So I really wanted to make sure I emphasized that here as well. That's
great. Yeah, because I mean, as humans, like one of the best ways or easiest ways to learn is by association, right? So like if you know something in one location, that's why metaphors are so useful, right? When trying to teach someone something. So like if you have the equivalent on either side, and like to your point, if you're a Grasshopper user, oh, well, I know what the frame is, then it's this in Dynamo, oh, okay, I get it. So to have that, I can see, and I see the parallel too to the gentleman in the airport. If you have that, it's almost like what is that other language, you know, in this other program, and how you would accomplish that in software terms. So
yeah. Now that's not the only use of the book. That is kind of, I'm going to call that a byproduct. I mean, I know a lot of Dynamo users who buy the book and never looked on the left green side. They only focus on the right side, and that's okay. You know, I actually use this as well as a reference manual. I was using it. I have my copy right here, actually. I used it maybe a month ago when I was looking for some list management terms in Grasshopper, but I knew what it was in Dynamo. And so I looked at my table of concepts, I went over, and I was like, oh, that's right. You know, and then I would use Grasshopper. So, you know, if anything, I'm using it. So that's good.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I love it. Cool. I'm trying to think, do you have maybe some other examples? I don't know if you have any that you're able to share on your side, Marcelo. It's okay if not, but do you have some other examples? I have these that are, you know, on the website.
Yeah, those are.
Yeah, do you have some other examples on your side? It's okay if not.
Sure.
But.
Yeah, sure I do. Are there any questions from the audience we need to field?
Not yet. Everyone's saying that they really like the content of the book. It's a great way, you know, to learn some of these concepts. People are really encouraged to see what people are doing in the industry to help each other out, which is great. So not a ton of questions yet. Or here, there is one at the bottom here. Marcelo, do you have a personal preference for either Dynamo or Grasshopper, or perhaps situations
I do
where you find one is better or suited for the other?
I do have a preference, and it's situational. That's an awesome question. Did that come from Daniel? That's a cool question.
Yes. Yep, Daniel. Okay.
Yeah, I do actually. I do. So maybe we'll start the conversation. You could just flick over one there, because there is an example there. One more. Okay. So in case anyone needs to get here, this is the aeccheatsheets.com, and then there's a yeah, there we go. So these are just some samples sitting kind of at the bottom. Let me answer that question, but there's one thing I want to mention first. If you keep scrolling all the way to the right, there's one more thing I did here, because I thought if this is a reference manual, you need a good way to find things. And so one is the concepts, but two is I cataloged every node that's on every page through a node index. So I think I just show the Grasshopper index here in the sample, but the book actually has a Dynamo one as well. So if the name of the node is point.by coordinates in Dynamo, well, then you just go to this page and it'll be like, you look that up in the index and it'll be like page 10, 15, 20, 85. You know, or I want to do topography. Topography is on page 8, 15, and 40 or something like that. Yeah. So I found I wanted to make sure there was a way to do an index, and then that was done through this kind of node index concept. This took me a very long time to do. I actually had to do it manually because you know, it's very difficult to extract node names out of graphics, right? So anyway. This is what this is all about. Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah. So if you scroll back one to this one, I want to answer Daniel's question, which is really good one, right? So I prefer one over the other when it's situational. And so the situation, let's paint a picture here, and we kind of started with, let's say, for example, you have a rhinoceros model. Either you built it, someone in your office built it, or client built it, or it's coming in from your office from somewhere, and it looks like this image. I'm using my mouse, but you can't see, but it looks like that image there in the rhino section there. Where basically it's a surface. Those are prep surfaces inside a rhinoceros, and it's got some parking and things like that. But your job is to take that surface out of rhinoceros and rebuild it in a meaningful way inside of Revit. Well, in this case, Dynamo would not be the best choice, because Dynamo doesn't do as good of a job talking with rhinoceros as Grasshopper does. So then my preference would be to take Grasshopper, use the new Rhino inside Revit technology, and then go in and place these 6 nodes. It only takes 6. extract that geometry and rebuild it inside of Revit. So it's always situational, but if you want to generalize it, I use Grasshopper a lot of times when I'm doing interfacing with, I use Grasshopper when I'm interfacing with Rhinoceros or I'm doing interoperability. When I'm doing things like documentation, some easy, simple modeling, some placing of elements in Revit that does not have to do with interoperability, I prefer to use Dynamo. Dynamo has been talking with the Revit database for over 8 years now, right? So you know that, Bill. You were kind of there in its infancy. So there's a lot of maturity around Dynamo with dealing with documentation, things like that. The power of Grasshopper and Rhinoceros is a very robust modeling engine, and you need to do interoperability a lot of times between Rhinoceros and Revit, and then the conduit for that makes a lot of sense for it to be Grasshopper. Now, I'm not one to sit here and say, Rhinoceros is a better 3D modeling program than Revit. You can debate that on your own, but I'm just saying a lot of times you need to interact with Rhinoceros and Revit. For whatever reason, Grasshopper is a great way to do that. Now, with this new technology, of course, there are overlaps, and the book really emphasizes those. I can show you some more examples, but that does that kind of answer that question, Daniel? Maybe so.
Yeah, I think so. I think a comment or a question I have too, which might be a good segue into the next question, is, you know, Rhino also being a NURB-based modeling program where Revit's not. There's this difference between how either program rationalizes geometry even. And so where some things are may be more advantageous to do in Rhino versus in Revit. I also find like Revit's a really good kind of like building information management tool, where Dynamo lends itself sometimes better to that, in my opinion. I don't know if you have comment on that, Marcelo, but also as a segue, and forgive me if I missay the name here, but Pad Manaba, he was saying like the level of development restricting him while using Grasshopper Dynamo without Rhino Revit. So I think just like those stand alone, just Rhino or Grasshopper, to build a model from scratch. He's saying there's kind of a limitation if he doesn't have, you know, Rhino or Revit. He's wondering if you have any suggestions for that, where you might just be doing like modeling by itself, just using, you know, the visual programming, the nodes or boxes as you call them. Do you have a suggestion for that, Marcelo, as it relates to modeling and some of the limitations without the modeling program, just the visual scripting portion?
Well, yes and no. You know, every time I talk about the book, it always turns into well, which one's better, Dynamo or Grasshopper? Quite honestly, the only thing I wanted to get across was that you can do equivalence in both, and I emphasize that. I'm not one to say one is better than the other. I'm not going to say that. I think everyone has their preferences. You know, I mean, quite honestly, like for me, I would rather model a cow inside of Revit, but I'd rather model a snake inside of Rhino. Okay.
Yep.
So what does that really mean? Well, it's just a matter of preference, right? So I'm going to also throw that out as a matter of preference for Dynamo and Grasshopper. I've built a Grasshopper inside of Dynamo using just Dynamo, you know, and so it's a matter of preference. Dynamo is not as old as mature as Grasshopper, and so there's a lot of support, and there's a lot of people who've been using Grasshopper for a lot longer than Dynamo. And the only thing I can say really is you have to try it for yourself and make the decision for yourself. And then when you make the decision on which way you want to go, if you still need support, then the book can help guide you along the way. You know, that's the only answer I could really give you there. P, we'll call him P.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And then Marcello Nadesh is asking about generative design. He says generative design is available in Grasshopper for so many years, but it has come to Dynamo very recently. Assuming he's talking about Fractal, which became Refinery, which now is Revit generative design. Is Grasshopper more advanced than Dynamo? You know, because it has more years of development and maturity in the context of generative design, I think is his question.
That's a good question. That's a good question. These are good questions. Wow. And I knew I'd be put in this position. Like, which one? We're doing it again, right? We now know that there is a lot of overlap with Grasshopper and Dynamo. We know that there's a lot of overlap. We know that there's now an overlap with generative design, right? With Dynamo interacting with the refinery and then Grasshopper as well, with all the amazing component add-ins that are available. I'm going to say again, it's a matter of preference on which way you want to go, and it matters on where you're going as well, which would depend on kind of how you'd want to do it. Are you comfortable with building it in doing your computational design? I'm sorry, / generative design in using Grasshopper and its mature tools and so on and so on. Then what are you going to do? Then what? Huge question mark. Are you then going to then just take screenshots? Are you just going to do renderings to win a job and that's it? Are you going to eventually move that down through production, which includes Revit? Okay, now do you have a decision to make? Are you comfortable with moving that information from Rhinoceros and Grasshopper into Revit? Or are you more comfortable with doing all of your computational design / generative design using Dynamo and Project Refinery and keeping that all within Revit? That again is going to be a personal preference of yours. That's how I'm going to answer that question, because I can't point you in one way or the other. I can just say, honestly decide for yourself.
Good comment. I like it, Marcelo. Another question from Lucas is, he was wondering if you have any recommendations on where to look for inspiration for scripts.
Are we talking scripts in Dynamo or scripts in Grasshopper? I imagine, because I heard the word script, we're probably talking Grasshopper. Or
let's say both. Do you have a recommendation on either one?
Well, this day and age, there's a lot of resources out there. Probably a good Google search will get you started.
Right.
on being influenced on what's possible. That's kind of the answer I have. The book was really intended for people to go to when they've kind of made up their mind on how they want to move forward. And so the book and me, I'm not here to steer you in, quite honestly, one direction or the other. That has never been my job in AEC. I don't think that should be anybody's job in AEC. I think you really need to, quite honestly, decide for yourself. And it's situational. Sometimes your best program for the day is Grasshopper. Sometimes it's Dynamo. Sometimes it's only Revit and the adaptive component environment. Sometimes it's only Rhino and it's great add-ins. So it quite honestly all depends. I mean, back when I was building like elephants inside of Revit, I wasn't telling everyone drop all of your other modeling programs because you have to do it in Revit. I was just showing people you can do it in Revit. It could be done, and this is how you do it, and you decide if you want to or not. I know these are questions, and these come up because people struggle with this, and I totally get it. I really do. I feel all of your pain in the industry, especially now. There's so much tech hitting you all at once. Like, what do you do? Where do you start? I think probably the best thing to do is to have a problem and try to solve it. Let's say you get a model of a surface in Rhinoceros and you need to get it to Revit in a meaningful way, quote unquote. Okay, how am I going to do that? And how am I going to do that? Or you get total station coordinates in an Excel file and you need to build a topo surface in a Revit. How do I do that? Or I get survey data that locates planters. I'm doing a lot of topo examples, aren't I? But you know what I mean? Whatever. How do I do that? And I think at that point, when you have a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of a goal, it can help you focus on how to do it. And I'm not saying you have to do this, but if you want to be so bold as to try 2 different solutions and compare them for yourself, then you can do that and kind of make a decision, accordingly.
That's good. I like that you said, one isn't better than the other. It's, quote, situational. And you said sometimes Dynamo will be the right job for the day, and sometimes Grasshopper will be the right job for the day. And so depending on the workflow and what you're trying to accomplish, I think is a really good point in thinking about the overall, like the map, right, of like what you're trying to accomplish. Like you were saying, if you're trying to get the data into Revit, or you're not getting the data into Revit. But would you say one has its strengths over the other, like for certain tasks?
Yes, I would. Okay. I would. Everything has its strengths and weaknesses, right?
And what would those be, would you say? Like what's like Dynamo really good for versus what is Grasshopper really good for?
Yeah. Now I'm going to put a big, and you can put this up maybe later, is in my humble opinion. All of this is in my humble opinion, right? Because for me personally, sometimes Grasshopper is the best for certain situations, and then Dynamo is the best for certain situations. I'm not saying that's going to be the case for you. Some people never want to touch Dynamo. Some people never want to touch Grasshopper. And, that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying that you have to use one or the other in certain situations. I want to get that out of the way. So that means, again, boom, in my humble opinion. Okay, so in my humble opinion, I do feel like some have some strengths and some weaknesses. And I touched on it before. I think Dynamo, because it's been talking with the Revit database for much longer than Grasshopper has, I'm going to put in quotes in a formal way. I know there were some people building early Grasshopper components that touched the Revit API, but this new technology called Rhino Inside Revit is developed by the McNeil folks, and they really took a hard look on how to do it in a very systematic, formulaic way that is much more stable than anything has been done in the past.
Agreed.
Okay, so with all that said, Dynamo has been around talking with the Revit database for longer than Grasshopper. So I think the strengths, if you were going to take a snapshot now, I'm not saying 8, 3, 1 year in the future, whatever. Take a snapshot right now of the industry. Right now, I do feel that Dynamo is better at talking with the Revit database for things that involve element creation and documentation within Revit. I think Grasshopper and the Rhino Inside Revit technology does a better job at interoperability between Rhinoceros and Revit. And so what I found in offices is that you may have some people who only use Grasshopper or only use Dynamo. Then what tends to happen is you don't kind of touch the strengths and weaknesses. So for example, I'm doing a lot of hand waving, but let's say, for example, you have a curved wall. Maybe I should show my screen, but I'll just do an interpretive dance. Let's say you have a rhinoceros model that has a curved wall in it, right? Okay, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with this situation? How are you going to get that curved wall in a meaningful way into Revit and down your production line, right? So this was a real example that I actually dealt with. So one is I used the Rhino Inside Revit technology. I used Grasshopper as the conduit. I took that curved rep surface, brought it into Revit, and it built an actual family with that wall in it. Then once it was inside of Revit, I then fired up Dynamo, and then I placed a wall by face onto that surface. So I had Grasshopper and Dynamo open at the same time, and right in the middle was Revit. And so that was the best way for me to solve this problem. And then anytime that wall changed and moved inside of Rhinoceros, it automatically updated that family, and then Dynamo automatically updated that wall by face, and then boom, down the assembly line it went. It got tagged, it got cut in elevation, it got its material schedule, and away it went. And they were working together, and they were happy. So that's kind of, yeah. So that's just kind of a real example of how the strengths of each program could be used. Taking a snapshot right now, I know this is going to be on YouTube, so someone's going to watch this 4 years from now and be like, that's not really the case anymore. But anyway, we talk now. Those are some of the strengths that I see that people could take.
Yeah, well, I mean, it changes all the time, right? So like before, like I was very obsessed with this whole interoperability piece of it. And I remember using the Whitefeet Hummingbird interoperability tool with Grasshopper and Revit before Rhino Inside came out. And I was like, I got to be honest, when I first saw Rhino Inside, I was like, well, I don't really see the huge value any different than what we had before. But in my ignorance, as I started to learn more about Rhino Inside, it actually became a really powerful tool, because where you would kind of start to do things, and no downplay on any the Hummingbird piece of it, it's just the tool I was using at the time. But what I started to see is that the Rhino Inside piece actually was able to process more information and better, like in bulk, where other one was like a one stop, like you would push it like once. And it was almost like the synchronization, like you're talking about when you're using like Rhino, Grasshopper, Revit, Dynamo. And my point being is that it changes. Like there was the Centipede app that did the interop. Like there's all these different tools that have tried to take their own stab at it. And I do really like the Rhino Inside workflow. It's become, I don't know, just the most integrated, very seamless kind of workflow out of all of them that I've seen. And Chris on our team did a really good example of it. And once he showed me what he was doing, I was like, oh, this is a really powerful workflow. And I really do like that Rhino Inside and how it's executing the task and the interoperability piece.
Okay, cool. Well, great point. And, you know, maybe I can share my screen just so we can flip through a few things.
Go ahead.
We're not just looking at the samples. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to actually show you a, can you see? Whoa, whoa, okay. That was wild. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this is actually the book. This is my proof, so I can kind of flip through it. But so here's actually the book. There's over, there's about 300 pages. But it basically, it all starts with the, you can hardly see this, my goodness. Yeah, but it basically starts with the geometry section, and then it goes through with the Revit interface. Oh, so now I've got my computer slowing down here. Probably, yeah. It talks about interoperability. It talks about more complicated stuff like vector normals, things like that. Then it gets into the Revit database. And then there are other sections in here that talk about like C# coding. It talks about, so this is some of the geometry creation and geometry conversions that we talked about in the past. We talked about it, but I didn't answer it, which was the question about conversion of different elements. So here's that example again that we showed. Let me see if I can have another one pop up. But basically, yeah, Rhinoceros is a NURBS modeling environment. I mean, you can model other elements. Revit, if you're talking about the massing environment or adaptive component, is something called uses something called Hermite splines. But then also, if you talked about the like topography, that's actually mesh modeling. And it works a little differently when you create elements inside of families. So there is a bit of different for computation. Those aren't really big issues. If you have something extremely complicated, like for example, I have never seen any issues going from Revit into Rhino, because you can go the other way too. We talk about interoperability from Rhinoceros into Revit, but you can go Revit to Rhinoceros. Like I use that workflow sometimes, Revit to Rhinoceros. Sometimes I like to build my stairs in Revit and then send it to Rhinoceros because I like the way Revit builds the stairs. You know, or I actually like the way I build rhinos in Revit, and then I bring it into Rhino. You know, so it just kind of all depends on your personal preferences. A few other things I can point out. The book also talks about interoperability and the ability now to use interoperability in a very meaningful way, a lot like the concept of Revit. So for example, in Rhino 7, which is what the Rhino Inside Revit technology is working off of, is the version Rhino 7. By the way, you do need a Rhino license 7 in order to get the Rhino Inside Revit technology and the Grasshopper Inside Revit. You now have the ability to embed information like through key value pairs inside of Rhinoceros. So if you have designers in Rhinoceros who need to embed information like this is the actual shape of the column, but it is also a W 12 by 26, and we're using imperial units. You can actually embed that in the metadata inside of Rhinoceros, and then that information could be extracted out using Grasshopper, and you can rebuild that inside of Revit using that same metadata. So now this new technology is allowing Revit and Rhinoceros to talk together, and not just geometry, but also parameters and information and key value pairs, things like that. Another thing that the book emphasizes is kind of a quick way to step into the Revit API using coding to make custom nodes. So on the right here, this is some C# coding. Basically, this gets an element ID. You might think that's pretty easy, but it's basically a way to step you in and learn the code to build a custom node inside of Revit. There's an actual equivalent way to do it inside of Grasshopper as well if you wanted to make custom nodes. So I just point that out. At the very end of the book, there are some common tasks that, like you do in Dynamo, like running a script or turning things on and off. So
this is great.
You have common Dynamo tasks, and then you have common Grasshopper tasks on the other side. So like, how do you run in manual automatic in Dynamo, and then how is that kind of equivalently done in Grasshopper? And then how do you turn geometry on and off? And so there's a little kind of guide here as well at the end of the book that kind of shows you how to do that.
I like that. I didn't know it had that. I just thought it had like the complete scripts, but it actually shows at like a node level or user interface level, like how to interact with the nodes. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, and if you only want this page, you can just take a screenshot or watch YouTube, and you won't have to buy the book. I take the position, I do not want anyone to purchase this book until they feel it's 100% necessary for their office. I have had people tell me they have bought the book for one single example that they needed, but that saved them so much money above and beyond just the price of the book because of just that one concept they learned, like how to turn objects into 3D rooms, or how to adjust structural framing, or how to build slabs, whatever it might be. Whatever it might be, right? There's almost 300 concepts in here. So if you could pick one or two that you need, then, I think it's worth it. So
totally. So Marcelo, how much is the book, and where can someone purchase it at?
Okay, let me unshare my screen here so we don't go to infinity and beyond again.
There we go.
The book could be purchased. The link here is aeccheatsheets.com, and you can go to the Grasshopper Dynamo reference page. The idea is I plan to make more books kind of in this format. I'm actually working on an equivalent C# and Python one right now.
Oh, sweet.
As well as a few others. So this is just kind of one in many series. But yeah, you can go there, or you can just Google it on Amazon. It comes in hardback and paperback as well as ebook. Yeah.
That's so great.
The paperback is $75 US. Although Amazon runs sales all the time. Yeah, see there right now it's on sale for $60.
That's great. And I mean, like, take your billable rate and think about how much you might spend Googling and trying to find an answer, where you could just have this as a cheat sheet, sitting on your desk. It's totally worth it. This is incredible. And then something like also you could consider having it as like a library at your office, so that way people can share it. And I mean, you could really get a lot of use out of the book. This is incredible, Marcelo.
Thank you. Yeah, and you can see it's been well received. It's way above and beyond what I would have expected the book to do. But do you know how many Dynamo? Do you know how many? Do you know how many books there are on Rhino inside Revit right now? There's 0. Do you know how many Dynamo books there are out there right now? There's probably just 2 or 3.
Really?
Yeah. And so another reason I wrote the book is I knew there was a void I needed to fill. And so this kind of did it. So I wasn't going to talk here about how to purchase the book, but I do in concept. I just wanted to explain it for people who had a hard time understanding it and what it's all about. If you do feel like this book is not for everybody, if you do feel like you're a guru Dynamo and a guru Grasshopper expert, you probably won't learn much from this book. But if you're a beginner in both or one or the other, this book certainly can help you. There are some universities now that are using this in their labs as well as so it could also be used as kind of a training resource as well, if you wish.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, we are at top of the hour. It seems like in the comments, everyone gave some really great feedback and reviews. So appreciate the comments, Marcelo. Man, I so appreciate you coming on today, and it's good to see you. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge, for writing the book, continuing to share this information with the rest of the industry. I know I speak for everyone listening in that we so appreciate you and all the contributions you make. We're so grateful to you, bud.
Great, thank you. And if anyone anything you see in the book, I do also offer training, so you can contact me if you need to explore that further. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as well. Thank you for having me on, Bill. You do great work.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. I appreciate that, man. All
Okay,
right. Well, thanks everybody.
For showing up. I appreciate. I mean, I've really felt a lot of love and support from the AEC community, and that's one reason why I do this, to always strive to learn more and teach, is because it's such a great community, and the love and support from the community has been amazing. So I really appreciate it. Everyone here and anyone's going to watch in the future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Marcelo. Appreciate you, bud. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you on the next one, and you guys have a great day.